Welcome to the High-Speed Rail webinar series on policy considerations for national high-speed rail network development, focusing on cases in Uzbekistan. Join us on April 9, 2026, to explore insights and strategies from experts. The event will be held online, accommodating various time zones. We are pleased to introduce 3 publications by Asian Development Bank Institute that provide important policy insights on high-speed rail and urban transport development in Asia. The first book, Frontiers in High-Speed Rail Development, highlights that high-speed rail development has been recognized as an important policy tool for regional development around the world but faces a range of challenges in its execution. The second book, Policy Messages for Planning and Implementing High-Speed Rail in Asia, highlights that high-speed rail's capacity to accelerate regional development is driven by the nonlinear, dynamic, technical, and social interactions in a high-speed rail system. The third book, Urban Transport Transitions in Developing Asia, From Challenges to Change, shift the focus to urban mobility and sustainable transport transitions. Alongside these book publications, we have designed a webinar series for further disseminate the key policy messages and creating a platform for dialogue among policymakers, practitioners, and experts. The first high-speed rail webinar series was held in May 2024, examining policy considerations for high-speed rail in Italy. Over 60 participants joined to discuss its unique aspects, including history, open access principles, and diverse funding mechanisms. Partners included Ferrovie dello Stato Italiane and leading universities. Scan here to access the policy brief. Lessons from Italy's high-speed rail development. The December 2024 webinar focused on the People's Republic of China, with 97 participants, including government officials and researchers. The session emphasized aligning high-speed rail construction with spatial planning, highlighting China's shift from demand-driven to supply-driven approaches. The third high-speed rail webinar series was held in October 2025 and attracted 74 participants, representing 10 countries, with an emphasis on the importance of demand-based planning and recognizing that management improvements cannot substitute for sufficient demand in ensuring long-term high-speed rail sustainability. In July 2025, Asian Development Bank Institute and East's IRG hosted a scoping workshop in Tokyo. Asian experts from various countries shared insights on high-speed rail development. The workshop underscored the need for long-term commitment and alignment with economic strategies to advance urban development and sustainable transport. Disclaimer: this event may be photographed, streamed live, or recorded. By participating, attendees consent to the use of their likeness and comments in media publications and external affairs without compensation. Your participation signifies acceptance of these terms. House rules: ensure punctual attendance and remain until the end. Use the Q&A box for questions and the chat box for sharing thoughts. Please rename your Zoom name to include your name, affiliation, and country. These guidelines ensure a smooth and engaging webinar experience. Agenda overview. The webinar will begin with opening remarks, followed by sessions on the history and challenges in financing high-speed rail in Uzbekistan. A 5-minute break is scheduled. The event continues with a session on institutional arrangements for operation and maintenance of high-speed rail, a panel discussion, and concludes with an open discussion, feedback survey, and closing remarks from distinguished speakers. Opening remarks. Professor Bambang Brodjonegoro, Dean and CEO of Asian Development Bank Institute, will deliver the first opening remarks. With extensive experience in government and academia, Professor Brodjonegoro brings valuable insights into economic affairs and national development strategies. We are also pleased to have Mr. Umid Abidxadjayev deliver the second remarks. Mr. Abidxadjayev has been closely involved in economic planning and infrastructure policy, including the development and financing frameworks for high-speed rail as part of the country's long-term connectivity and growth strategy. Session 1. History of high-speed rail development in Uzbekistan. This session will explore the evolution of high-speed rail in Uzbekistan, examining key milestones and developments. Attendees will gain a comprehensive understanding of Uzbekistan's high-speed rail journey and its impact on national infrastructure. Session moderator, Professor Bakram Mirkazimov, Professor, Deputy Rector for Research and Innovation, Westminster, will moderate the session. With expertise gained through research-based policy and infrastructure insights, Professor Bakram is well equipped to guide discussions on Uzbekistan's high-speed rail history. Session speaker, Professor Richard Pomfret, Professor of Economics Emeritus, Adelaide University, Australia, Senior Associate Fellow, Johns Hopkins University Bologna Centre, Italy, will share insights on the economic dimensions of high-speed rail and regional connectivity. His expertise in Central Asian economies and regional connectivity will provide valuable perspectives on Uzbekistan's high-speed rail initiatives. Session 2. Challenges and issues in financing high-speed rail in Uzbekistan. This session will address the financial obstacles and funding strategies for high-speed rail development in Uzbekistan, including the role of official development assistance and public-private partnerships in financing large-scale rail infrastructure. Participants will learn about innovative solutions to overcome financial hurdles. Session moderator, Dina Azalieva, Senior Economist at Asian Development Bank, will lead the discussion on financing challenges. With extensive research on green finance, infrastructure investment, and energy policy, Dr. Azalieva offers deep insights into the financing challenges of large-scale transport projects. Session speaker, Professor Naoyuki Yoshino, Professor Emeritus, Economics, Keio University, Japan, Special Professor, Tokyo Metropolitan University, Honorary Fellow, Asian Development Bank Institute, will discuss his experience in infrastructure financing and the economic mechanisms for mobilizing investment in high-speed rail, drawing on insights from Asian development contexts. The webinar will begin shortly. Please use the Q&A box for questions and the chat box for sharing thoughts. Please rename your Zoom name to include your name, affiliation, and country.
Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to today's webinar from our high-speed rail webinar series, addressing policy considerations for national high-speed rail network development, cases in Uzbekistan, organized by the Asian Development Bank Institute. My name is Yen Nguyen, and I will get us started today before handing over to our distinguished speakers. We are honored to have such a diverse audience joining us today from Uzbekistan, Japan, but also from Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, etc. With this webinar, ADBI is pleased to continue a successful series on high-speed rail that started analyzing cases in Italy in May 2024, cases in the People's Republic of China in December 2024, and cases in Spain in October 2025. Before we begin, please note that this webinar may be recorded, photographed, or live streamed. By continuing to participate, you consent to the use of your image, voice, or contributions into ADBI publications or other media or for external communications purposes. To ensure a smooth and engaging experience, please be reminded of the following house rule. All participants are muted by default. Please use the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions at any time. We will address as many as we can. And feel free to use the chat box to share your reactions or comments with the speaker, panelists, and fellow participants, but please keep it respectful and relevant to the discussions. Likewise, we inform you that this session will be simultaneously interpreted into Russian language. Should you need to listen to the session in Russian, please click on the globe symbol at the Zoom interface and select the Russian channel. We will also have an interactive post at the beginning of each session, so please stay engaged. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available after the event. Before we begin our first session, we'd like to take a quick group photo with our distinguished speaker and panelist. All right, so I think our colleagues Chosho and Noriko-san will help to take the photo. So speakers and panelists, I saw your videos already on. And now on the count of 3, let on smile. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And thank you once again for joining us today. On today's webinar, we explore how high-speed rail has developed in Uzbekistan, highlighting its unique approach of upgrading unconventional rail corridors to high-speed rail standards to achieve rapid connectivity with a manageable cost. And to open today's proceeding, we are honored to have Professor Bambang Brodjonegoro, our Dean and CEO of the Asian Development Bank Institute, with extensive experience in government and academia. Professor Brodjonegoro brings valuable insight into economic affairs and national development strategies. We warmly invite you to listen.
Thank you, Nia. Very good afternoon, good morning to everybody from a different time zone. And especially I would like to greet Dr. Umid Abidxadjayev, Deputy Minister of Economy and Finance of the Republic of Uzbekistan, as well as all distinguished speakers, colleagues, and participants joining us from Uzbekistan, Japan, and across Asia and beyond. It is really my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on policy consideration for national high-speed rail network development cases from Uzbekistan, organized by the ADBI. I would like to extend my appreciation to our distinguished expert from Uzbekistan, Japan, Australia, and Malaysia for sharing their valuable insight with us today. I'm delighted that we have online participants from many countries around the world who have taken time to join us. This webinar is the 4th in ADBI's high-speed rail webinar series on policy consideration for national high-speed rail network development. Our earlier episode examined the experiences of Italy, People's Republic of China, and Spain. Each session has deepened our understanding of the diverse pathways countries have pursued in planning, financing, and operating high-speed rail system. Today, we turn to a case that is in many ways one of the most directly relevant for developing Asia. Unlike the earlier cases, which examine countries that develop high-speed rail largely through domestic industrial capacity or within major financial market, Uzbekistan represents a different trajectory, one that many developing Asian countries will recognize. Uzbekistan has built its high-speed rail services by importing technology, relying on official development assistance and multilateral financing, and adapting inherited Soviet-era broad gauge infrastructure to modern demands. The Afrosiop service connecting Tashkent and Samarkand, launched in 2011 with Talgo technology from Spain, was a landmark achievement. Today, Uzbekistan continues to modernize with Korean technology transfer, extending and upgrading its network while managing the unique challenges of a landlocked country navigating the complexities of regional connectivity. This includes increasingly strategic middle corridor linking the People's Republic of China to the Caucasus and Europe. Let me share a little bit my experience when I was Minister of Finance and Planning in Indonesia, in which at that time, the president at that time really wants Indonesia to have the very first high-speed train. And finally, after some complication, because it is a project with a very huge financing and the new technology, and then of course there is always controversy whether we should build high-speed rail or we just maintain the existing railway system. At the end, Indonesia finally has the very first high-speed rail between Jakarta and Bandung using the China technology. And now government start to think about extension of that network. So I think the Indonesian experience also quite similar what Uzbekistan has been doing. And I believe Uzbekistan has been earlier compared to Indonesia in decision to build high-speed rail. So I really applaud the policymakers in Uzbekistan who have a very tough stand in making sure the project will be completed. So today's webinar brings together a rich combination of perspective. Professor Richard Pomfret from Adelaide University will set the historical context, tracing Uzbekistan railway legacy from the Soviet era through independence to the present day. Professor Noyoki Yoshino, ADBI Honorary Fellow, will examine the financing dimension, including spillover effects and how public-private partnership can support high-speed rail investment. Dean Davran Rajibayev and Professor Altin Lesov from Tashkent State Transport University will offer first-hand insight into the institutional arrangement for operating and maintaining high-speed rail in Uzbekistan, from the early collaboration with Spanish engineers on commissioning the first trains to ongoing infrastructure modernization. Professor Hironori Kato from University of Tokyo will draw broader lessons for developing Asia, with commentary from Professor Tomu Kikuchi from Waseda University. We will then hear from a distinguished panel of experts offering comparative perspective from Malaysia, Central Asia, and the wider region. I would also like once again to acknowledge and thank Dr. Umid Abidxadjayev, Deputy Minister of Economy and Finance of the Republic of Uzbekistan. And I'm really glad to know that in the past, Dr. Umid was part of ADBI as ADBI Research Associate. And of course, we are proud to have so-called our alumni now having a very important position in Uzbekistan government. I also would like to acknowledge all government officials from government of Uzbekistan for joining us today, underscoring the important Uzbekistan places on knowledge exchange and international cooperation in the railway sector. I hope this session will foster a rich exchange of ideas, practical recommendations that can inform policy design and implementation across developing Asia, particularly for countries that, like Uzbekistan, are navigating the path from ambition to operation with external technology and financial partnership. Thank you very much and wish you a productive and engaging webinar.
Thank you very much, Dean Bambang, for your insightful remarks. And now, following that, it is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Umid Abidxadjayev, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Economy and Finance, the Republic of Uzbekistan, to share the second opening remarks. And Mr. Abidxadjayev has been closely involved in economic planning and infrastructure policy, including the development and financing frameworks for high-speed rail as part of the country's long-term connectivity and growth strategy. Mr. Abidxadjayev, my apology if I pronounce your name incorrectly. And now we warmly welcome you to listen.
Okay. Dear Dean Brodjonegoro, dear Professor Yoshino, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's really good to be back. I see lots of familiar faces, Mr. Sitharam, all colleagues, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to join you today. This webinar is, as was mentioned by Dean Brodjonegoro, is particularly meaningful to me. Earlier, I had the privilege of working at the Asian Development Bank Institute. It's a place that gave me not only a professional experience, but also a deeper understanding of how ideas can shape policy and how policy in turn shapes development. Allow me to start with a simple proposition. High-speed rail is not about speed, it's about economic geometry. It changes how distance, labor, and markets interact, and in doing so, it changes the structure of growth itself. In Uzbekistan, we're beginning to observe this transformation in practice. Since 2011, high-speed rail has been connected Tashkent and Samarkand in 2 hours, later extending to Bukhara, where renewed mausoleum of Imam Bukhari opened last month. From May this year, it will reach Khiva across a corridor of more than 1,200 kilometers, reducing travel time from 14 hours to 7. But the key question is not the reduction in time. The key question is what happens next. Because we're already seeing early signals. Labor mobility is increasing, regional tourism is expanding, and businesses are beginning to operate across cities as if they were part of a single economic space. This leads to a broader insight. When distance collapses, economies do not simply grow, they reorganize. And this is where policy becomes critical, because infrastructure alone does not guarantee transformation. Alongside rail development, we have restructured the sector. We've separated infrastructure, freight, and passenger services. We've introduced commercial discipline and transparency, and we've adopted a modern legal framework. As a result, the sector moved into profitability in 2024, but more importantly, we're now entering a new phase. The next challenge is not building railways, it's capturing the full economic value. I think there was an idea of Professor Yoshino about capturing this land impact. This raises questions that are highly relevant beyond Uzbekistan. How do we design cities and regions around high-speed corridors? For example, we're developing lots of master plans, but how we can include this? How do we ensure that secondary cities benefit rather than fall behind? How do we integrate high-speed rail with industrial policy, tourism, and labor markets? Or how do we finance this transition in a sustainable and scalable way? These are not national questions, these are regional questions. And this is where institutions like ADBI can play a critical role. We see strong potential to work together on building a practical knowledge platform around high-speed rail and economic transformation in Central Asia, combining evidence, policy design, and real-world implementation. Because ultimately, connectivity is not an end itself. For countries like Uzbekistan, it's a way to redefine our position in the global economy. For many years, we were described as landlocked, but today we're becoming land-linked. And the real opportunity is to turn this connectivity into productivity and productivity into sustained inclusive growth. Last week, we had a really good forum on productivity for Central Asia. We established a very strong partnership with Asian Productivity Organization. So in that sense, this high-speed rail is contributing a lot. Let me conclude by wishing all participants a productive and insightful discussion. I would like also to apologize as I will need to leave shortly due to prior commitments, but I will follow the outcomes with great interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Umid. In short, thank you so much. And also thank you, Dean Bambang, for kindly setting the stage for today's discussion. And now we move to our first session of the day on the history of high-speed rail development in Uzbekistan. So let me briefly invite our speakers. The session will be moderated by Professor Bahrom Mukasimov, Deputy Rector for Research and Innovation at Westminster International University in Tashkent, with expertise gained through the research-based policy and infrastructure insights. Professor Bahrom is well equipped to guide discussion on Uzbekistan's high-speed rail history. He will be joined by Professor Richard Bamfret, Professor of Economics Emeritus, Adelaide University in Australia. Professor Bamfret will share insights into the economic dimensions of high-speed rail and regional connectivity. His expertise in Central Asian economies and regional connectivity will provide valuable perspective on Uzbekistan high-speed rail initiatives. Please join me in welcoming both of them. Just a quick reminder to our speakers. So we're going to set off 3 minutes left, and you're going to see the clock on the screen. So when you see the time, the clock, please wrap up your presentation, Professor Richard. 3 minutes left, and you can see the clock. And for our participant, please be reminded that there will be a Q&A session after Professor Richard's presentation. So we invite all participants to post questions on the Zoom Q&A box. And throughout the session, you are welcome to also send a comment or reaction. And without further ado, Professor Bahrom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nia. So good afternoon to all participants. Good morning for everyone joining us from far and near Tashkent. So very privileged to be here to moderate this first session. And thank you very much for this kind introduction. And thank you to Dean Bambang and Mr. Abidxadjayev to set the stage for a very important topic, high-speed rail development in Uzbekistan. I think it's a long kept secret that not many people know that Uzbekistan for many years, almost 15 years now, have high-speed rail development. And I think Professor Richard Pomfret is very well positioned to describe and set the stage historical scene for the high-speed rail development for us. So I'm happy to moderate the session. We have 15 minutes for the speaker, and then we have 10 minutes for Q&A. I think before we start, there was two poll questions, right, Nia?
Yes.
For the audience. Can we?
Yes. We launch. Can you see the questions?
Yeah. So there are two questions for the audience. Please, there are no right or wrong questions. This is just for us to collect views and opinions you might have on the questions you see today in front of you. So, and then I will read out the answers.
All right.
So if you could allow us to vote.
Oh, panelist. Oops. So, okay, let me check. And poll. I think panelists, you can vote now. All right. Share result.
Okay, so I think we have close to 90 people now joined online for the session. And there were two questions. Thank you very much for your answers. So the first question I will read: how familiar are you with Uzbekistan railway system? And 49% in the audience said not familiar, but interested to learn. Fair. And followed by the largest 34% who said, this is my first time hearing about it. So I think then this session is very timely and relevant. And the second question was, what do you consider the most important driver for high-speed rail development in your country? And majority, 2/3 almost, said economic growth and connectivity, followed by 17% of answers on the answer was reducing travel time between major cities. So thank you very much. I hope this also helps our speaker, Professor Pomfret, to integrate into his talk. So without further ado, Richard, screen is yours.
Okay, Thank you, Bahram, for the introduction, and thank you to the ADBI for the invitation to join this interesting event. I hope it will be interesting, and we'll try to get off to a good start. What my task here is to give an outline of Uzbekistan's railway legacy, which I think is very important to understand the starting point. Secondly, I'll look at the policy since independence in 1991, so that we've got this fairly long period to see what has happened. And thirdly, I'll talk about the challenges of maintaining and extending the high-speed rail passenger service, but also, as mentioned by the Deputy Minister, looking at the challenge of integrating the freight and passenger services on the rail network. Okay, can we move on, please, to the next slide? So, with a very specific starting point for the rail system. We start with the Russian conquest of Central Asia, which happened very quickly in the last third of the 1800s. It was accompanied by construction of railways for military purposes and for cotton exports. So we have several main lines constructed, first from the Caspian Sea, going east to Samarkand and eventually to Tashkent. Secondly, there's a line goes north from Tashkent to Russia. And in the early 20th century, the network was extended to the Fergana Valley and to the Persian border. So this has remained very much the outline of the network into 2026. The only major addition was the addition of the line through Kazakhstan to Siberia that was built during the Soviet era in the 1920s. So we've got this network which consists of these main lines and then this connecting line to the Fergana Valley. For those of you unfamiliar with the geography of Uzbekistan, the Fergana Valley is very important in that it's a very densely populated area. 4 of the country's 7 largest cities are in the Fergana Valley, but it is cut off from the rest of Uzbekistan by fairly high mountains. Please, the next slide, please. So this will give you some idea of the maps. You can see Tashkent there towards the left of the middle near the bottom. There's a line going to the Caspian Sea, which connects to Russia through the Volga river system and has become important more recently in connecting to Baku and onwards to Europe. We see the line going north to Russia, and we see the line on the far right going to Siberia. And these connect through Almaty and through Stalingrad, which is now Astana, the 2 largest cities in Kazakhstan. And the line to the Caspian Sea goes through Ashgabat, the capital of Turkmenistan. And we see that the systems of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are connected here to the main line. Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan, Frunze, now Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan. So Tashkent is really the center. It was the center of the rail system through ever since really from the late 1800s, but clearly through the Soviet era and down to independence. If we move on to the next slide, please. What happened after independence? One of the main priorities initially was to deal with the fact that in the Soviet Union, the transport networks ignored republic boundaries. The main Tashkent-Samarkand road passed through Kazakhstan. For our context, the rail connections between Tashkent and the Fergana Valley passed through Tajikistan. And so after dissolution of the Soviet Union, they sent all of the successor states, really, but the Central Asian successor states focused on nationalizing the rail and road system. So a major project for Uzbekistan was connecting Tashkent to the Fergana Valley. The Angren pipeline opened in 2016, funded in part by loans from China and the World Bank. A very difficult project geographically. If we can look at the next map, please. The next slide. We can see the red line in the middle. This is the line connecting Tashkent to the Fergana Valley, where you have these major cities, Namangan, Andijan, and Fergana and Kokand. Previously, it went through Kuzan. It looks a long way around, but Kuzan was sort of the obvious entry to the Fergana Valley because it followed the river, the Sidaya. Was much easier passage. So this connecting through the Angren pipeline was important in connecting this part to the Uzbek rail network. And when we look more recently, the red line to the far right of that map is the railway line currently being constructed from Kashgar in western China through Kyrgyzstan to the Fergana Valley and obviously going on to Tashkent. This construction started just over a year ago. This line expected to be completed in 2030. So you see, this is an important part of linking Uzbekistan directly to China and being part of a through line from China going to Europe that I'll talk about in the end of the presentation. So we can see, moving to the next slide, please, we can see that Tashkent is an international rail hub. Its main lines connect to the main cities of Kazakhstan, connects to the Caspian Sea, connects to Iran and Afghanistan, and the line being built to Kashgar will connect Tashkent to China through the Kyrgyz Republic. And this is part of the China-Europe rail connection. since 2010, one of the major developments in Eurasia has been the connection of Europe and China by an overland rail service. The rail service is never as inexpensive as the maritime links, but it was faster and more reliable. And so it was very popular with the phenomenon of global value chains, where firms wanted on time and fast delivery. Things like components for the German car factories in China, or electronics goods coming from Western China through to Europe. The lines all went through Kazakhstan and Russia. So this changed very clearly after 2022, after the invasion of Ukraine. And these lines are now being substituted by a middle corridor crossing the Caspian Sea to Baku. So far, the middle corridor traffic has overwhelmingly been through Kazakhstan. And a question that could be asked is, why not through Tashkent? And the answer is partly because Aktau port in Kazakhstan is more efficient than Turkmenbashi port in Turkmenistan, which would be the natural outlet going through Uzbekistan. But it clearly is an issue for the future, is the challenge of not only getting more of a middle corridor traffic, but also using a more efficient international network to promote trade from Uzbekistan to Europe and to China. Moving on to the next slide. How does this relate to high-speed rail? Well, as we heard in the introduction, the high-speed rail project between Tashkent and Samarkand was started in 2011. It's running very effectively in 2013, extended to Bukhara in 2016. My casual impression has been very successful, because every time I've tried to get a ticket on the high-speed rail, it's been sold out. So obviously very popular, but we'll hear more from the next two presenters about the economics of a high-speed rail. But it is clearly something that links the whole country. Next slide, please. If we look at the map of the high-speed rail system, what's happened here? This is not completely on there. But we see it's very similar to one of the earlier presentations in this series, the high-speed rail in Italy. In Italy, the main line of a high-speed rail is a line that goes from Milan to Rome, essentially. We have a similar situation in Uzbekistan. The main line is going from Tashkent through Samarkand to Bukhara to Khiva. It's been very, very successful. It's as we heard from the introductions, it improves domestic connectivity, reduces geographic isolation, it promotes regional development, and enhances access to economic opportunities throughout the country, perhaps leading to an increase in agglomeration, which obviously has its benefits and has potential costs. So next slide, please. So what do we see as I see as the challenges here? And these have, I think, already been talked about by Deputy Minister Umid, that we have a freight network that has been extended and improved. It's got a lot of potential for tapping into international freight networks through the middle corridor. And we have a high-speed rail network that's an attractive addition to the passenger network. And for me, one of the specific challenges of Uzbekistan is how does the country combine the development of these two different networks? You know, they're obviously related, but they obviously differ. For example, for the freight network, it's important to develop logistics networks. There has currently been a major development outside Tashkent. These logistic networks will be on the outskirts, outside the main cities. Obviously, for the passenger network, you need to go to the city center. So there are differences, but there are connectivities. And the corridor services need to be improved, particularly if Uzbekistan is going to tap into the middle corridor by reducing travel times across the country as part of a link between China and the Caspian ports. Next slide, please. So aware of the time constraint, I'll kind of bring this to a close, but just to emphasize the situation in the middle corridor. We can see that the green lines here are the main lines currently. They go through Kazakhstan. We see the potential through the brown line to go through Tashkent and take the shorter crossing across the Caspian Sea. We saw earlier that can be enhanced with the new line coming from Kashgar, which is the furthest westerly point in the Chinese system. There is also potential, obviously, in the longer term for Tashkent to be the link to, or going through Uzbekistan to be the link through Afghanistan. And there was also much talk, certainly before the last 2 months, of connections through Iran to the Indian Ocean, or cutting out the necessity for a sea crossing across the Caspian Sea. So all of these are potentially there. They require investments to upgrade the middle corridor facilities. These are on the way. I'll put a publicity plug for my book, which came out in January of this year, Connecting Europe and China. It talks more detail about this. We also see there is substantial interest from the multilateral development banks, the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, to fund and support this middle corridor development. So this is something that is, I think, very important for the future. And as we've heard in the introduction, we see that when distance collapses, economies reconstruct. And so this is an exciting moment, both as part of the Eurasian network, which I think is very much what the Asian Development Bank and the Asian Development Bank Institute are involved in, but also for the national development of Uzbekistan.
Professor
Thank
Richard,
you.
thank you so much, and on time. Thank you so much. Yeah, Professor Bakram, please.
So, Professor Pomfret, thank you very much for ending this talk on time. So now I would like to open up the session for questions from the audience. If there are any questions, please raise your hand. So you can either raise your hand or type your message, or okay. So there's one question. Professor Yoshino.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I would like to know the costs of those corridors, construction costs and maintenance costs, and what are the fees that to be charged to users. So if we have some estimates of those costs, I would like to know. Thank you.
Bakram, do you want me to answer individual questions or collect questions? And clearly the costs are, if we're talking about the freight corridors, the costs are higher for freight going by rail than going by boat from Shanghai to Rotterdam. Somewhere in the, it varies, obviously, these are market determined, in the order of between $3,000 for a container by sea or $8,000 by rail. So it's substantially more expensive, but it's faster. You know, it's 20 days instead of 45 days. If it's part of a global value chain, these inventory costs are really important. We see the route through Kazakhstan and Russia obviously was more efficient from a physical perspective than going across the Caspian Sea. But a lot of money is being invested. I mean, the World Bank just announced a $2 billion loan to Turkey to build an improved crossing across the Bosporus. These are very big projects. China is building the railway. It was delayed for a long time between Kashgar and Abidjan. Delayed for a long time because of the cost. It's very mountainous territory. So the countries in the European Union is also committed to, I think it's 18 billion euros to upgrade the middle corridor. So there's a lot of money going into improving and speeding up, and that should reduce the cost of overland transport. But the real point is not so much the cost in terms of money, it's the cost in terms of time. I think that's what's really important for the user.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Professor Yoshino and Richard. Another question, hand raised by our audience, Dinesh Raj Bhatrai, please.
Sorry, maybe you mean me, right? I'm Dina.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
there's another, sorry, Dinesh.
Another one.
Yes, and then you, Dina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing an insightful presentation on Uzbekistan's railway, high-speed railway network development. I would like to ask, how much time did that development has taken during the study and the project design and the construction that has been implemented to the date, that the full operation of that SR high-speed railway network within the Uzbekistan, as it connects more than not only the Uzbekistan, it also expanded to the nearby countries. Am I correct or not? If they expanded beyond the Uzbekistan's, that is the cross-border facilitation, it will be supporting for the countries. So what are the challenges during the implementation as well as in the designing stage the government has faced? Because the funding for the project has been initiated from the Asian Development Bank, World Bank, and the European Union, as well as other relevant stakeholders for the development of the high-speed railway network, because it has a highly important for the people and the country for the economic growth, as well as for the humankind that has been the human capital has been increased, and that has supported for the development of the humankind, that is shorten the route travel time as well. So that I would like to know the how if there are any challenges associated with the HSR development.
Thank you very much. Can we, Richard, can we take another question from Dina and then?
I was actually going to pass a little bit on that question. I think it's a very good question. There is an international connection going to Almaty, the largest city in Kazakhstan. In terms of financing, this is really the topic of the next session, and people who know a lot more about it than I do. So I think on the financing, please come back after the next session.
Okay, thank you. Dina?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Richard Pomfil. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation. As always, I learned from you. So my question is, of this new train, high-speed train from Tashkent to Samarkand and so on, it doesn't look like anything like Soviet time. Like you said, in the past we had like lots of old train. We still have it like from Soviet time, but this one looks like new, nothing like Soviet time. But still, I see, for example, on the booking website that the tickets can be booked only 45 days before travel time. And then, so this is something we also have it in Kazakhstan. I'm from Kazakhstan, but I have never seen this in Europe or Japan. And also another booking options in Japan and Europe, like you can buy a pass, which gives you unlimited trips and so on. So for me, like the pricing and booking still reminds like some requirements like from Soviet time, like 45 days. Like you said, the tickets purchased quickly, but you cannot buy well in advance. Like you have to wait for 45 days before, and then you have to, that day you have to buy. But for example, foreign travel, international trips, they usually planned way ahead. And tourists like this unlimited trip, like, you know, in Japan, there is JR Pass. All the foreigners buy this JR Pass so they can have unlimited traveling. So this kind of, okay, we have this nice infrastructure, nice train, but how about this other things like buying tickets, booking bundles?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Dina. Again, I'll pass this on a bit to the next sessions. I would mention, though, why I emphasize the origins of the rail network. It is very similar to Italy. In Italy, you're going in a straight line, very different to Japan. Japan, you've got a network, so you can go to different places that you're, and I think that affects things. But I agree with you. I've been very frustrated in Uzbekistan of trying to buy tickets on the high-speed rail service, and I would like to have sampled it and never been able to. So again, I think I should pass this on to, it's partly a financing question about how do you manage ticket demand. I think it's a really good question. But it's changing the mindset too, that if you want the high-speed rail or any transport network, it has to be available at short notice as well as long notice. for it to be really, really effective. So a business person that needs a short notice to get from Samarkand to Tashkent, they want to be able to buy a ticket and get on the train, not to be told it's full and they've got to drive or something.
Thank you very much, Dina, for the questions. So there are two questions from the audience that were typed. I will read those to you, Richard. The first one from, I think, the related questions. Was there any opposition to the construction of the high-speed rail development and/or sustainability issues? And the second related question, is the high-speed rail developed for freight or passenger or both? Seems there's no major city between Bukhara and Khiva. How to justify the investment, especially when it's for passenger only?
Okay. Yeah. The high-speed rail is passenger only, as it currently exists. And typically when we talk about high-speed rail for freight, the speeds are lower. Right? But there is the chance to use the same track. That's why I emphasized at the end, having a strategy that combines the interests of the passenger high-speed rail, which is important for connectivity of people, and the need for reliable, fast freight trains, which would be important both for Uzbekistan's own exports and imports, but also as part of the middle corridor. So, yeah, I mean, they are interconnected and important. But at the moment, high-speed rail, when we talk high-speed rail, it's essentially passenger. What was the first question, Bahram?
The first question, was there any opposition to the construction of high-speed rail or sustainability issues? And we are running out of time.
Yeah, and you can answer that better than I can because you were living in Uzbekistan, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, maybe the next two, the third session probably can answer that question better than we can.
Yes. So thank you very much, Richard. Thank you to our audience. Unfortunately, there are more questions and I have more comments, but due to time, I will leave that to the last session during the panel. Perhaps I will intervene. So thank you very much to our speaker, to our audience. So now I will pass the stage to our next moderator, Dina.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
To the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me introduce a bit for the unanswered question. We can request the Professor Richard. You can type the answer in the chat when just when you have time during the session. And now thank you, Professor Bahram, and thank you, Professor Richard, for the introduction to the history of the high-speed rail development in Uzbekistan. And I'm sure it has possibly sparked the question and reflection among our participants, as we can see many questions from the chat box. And certainly now we have a consistent background delve into our second session today, focusing on the challenges and issues in financing high-speed rail projects in Uzbekistan. And to bring along their insights, please join me in welcome Dr. Dina Abidxadjayev. Sorry, my apology for if I not pronounce your name correctly, as a moderator of the session, and Professor Naoyuki Yoshino as the speaker. And Dr. Dina is a senior economist at Asian Development Bank and also former research fellow at ADBI, with extensive research on the green finance, infrastructure investment, and energy policy. Dr. Dina offered the deep insights into the financing challenges of the large-scale transport projects. And now I hand over the floor to you as the moderator, and then you can introduce Professor Yoshino if needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, India. So actually, at the beginning, we already had our bio, so I don't think we need the detailed bio. And let's start with polling. Also for this session, we have polling, but we have short time, so I would like to ask everyone to answer very quickly. So we have two questions. What do you see as the biggest financing challenge for high-speed rail in your country? Several options, please. And then which financing approach do you think is most suitable for high-speed rail in your country? So while you're answering, let me introduce our next speaker. It's my sensei, Professor Naoyuki Yoshino. He is now Professor of Emeritus Economics at Keio University in Japan. And formerly he was Dean and CEO of Asian Development Bank Institute. So when I joined ADBI, that time he was Dean and CEO of ADBI. And he is the very well-known expert on spillover effects of infrastructure investments. Okay,
Thank you very much.
so shall we put results? Sorry, Professor Yoshino.
No, it's okay,
Let's see
fine.
results from polling. Okay, thank you so much for answering. I think everyone can see. So the biggest financing challenge is high upfront cost. And the second reason, difficulty attracting private sector investment. Yeah. And second question, which country financing approach do you think most suitable for high-speed rail in your country? So most answered government budget, sovereign funding. And then second, multilateral development banks such as ADB, AB, World Bank. Yeah, thank you so much. Professor Yoshino, thank you for your patience. Please, the screen is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you show my PowerPoints from ADBI side, if possible?
Yes, we will.
Yes, thank you. Then I would like to go one by one in 15 minutes. And today's moderator, Dina, used to be at ADBI, and this is part of our work. We have jointly worked together with, and also Umid Abidxadjayev. He was my former student and worked at ADBI, and we have done so many research on Uzbekistan's railway. So I'm going to use some part of those results. Okay, can you go to the next page? Okay, so I'm going to talk about 4 points. One is Asian infrastructure investment, and we need long-term investors such as pension funds and so on that could be also developed in East Asia, and that could finance these long-term projects. And I'm going to propose how to increase the rate of return by utilizing spillover effects. And if I have time, I'll touch upon about environmental issues. Thank you. Next page. Okay, PPP has been proposed in many cases. However, there are lots of problems in Asia and Latin America in the past. Rate of return was not so very high. And secondly, no incentives to increase rate of return, and lots of transparency that has created lots of corruptions in Latin America and Asia. Please go to next. So I'm focusing on how to increase the rate of return and how to increase the transparency of these projects so that corruption can be minimized, and also private investors will be willing to participate in this financing. So this diagram shows KG stands for government infrastructure, such as high-speed rail, that can bring new businesses into the region. And also agricultural farmers can ship their products much faster to cities. And then new services sector can be created that will increase employment in the region. So green line of KG to KP is the indirect effect to introducing new businesses, and L is creating new employment. Those are called spillover effects of infrastructure investments. Please go to next. And these are the high-speed rail that can increase the employment into the region as is shown. And also these materials can be brought into the port and Caspian Sea and so on that can export those products. Next, please go to next. And these spillover effects can be estimated by using translog production function. Please go to next. Then this is a case of Japan. The spillover effects from infrastructure investments include high-speed railways. 68% of total impacts are coming from spillover effects. One is bringing businesses into the region that can make agricultural farmers easy access to large cities, and employment can be created into the region. So those impacts are much bigger than direct effect created by high-speed rail or other infrastructure investments. Next. traditionally, private investors are very hesitant to put their money in high-speed rail and other transport infrastructures. The reason is coming from this diagram. Users on the left-hand side prefer lower prices, lower fees. But on the other hand, private investors on the right-hand side prefer higher rate of return. And especially if Uzbekistan and Central Asia, pension funds are now being created. Those are one of the big financing mechanisms to do these high-speed rail and so on. In order to do so, we have to increase the rate of return from these high-speed rail projects. The revenue should not only come from fees, which people prefer low prices, but also we can bring spillover effects on tax revenues that can be distributed to infrastructures that can increase private rate of return. Please go to next. And as I mentioned, many PPP, private financing, failed in Latin America in gray part, and blue part is Asian regions because of non-transparency and lack of rate of return. Please go to next. So my proposal is to make this sustainable, and also pension funds insurance of these regions can be invested in these high-speed rails. We have to inject not only user fees, but also other sources that is shown here. Spillover effects can create big tax revenues, increment of tax revenues. Part of those tax revenues should be returned to infrastructure operators and also infrastructure investors. In case of Japan, spillover tax revenues should be returned 2/3 to these infrastructure operators and to investors. And that can increase the rate of return, which is in addition to user fees. Please go to next. So this diagram shows R is the interest rate on government bond. And traditionally, many infrastructures, such as railway, high-speed rail, was very low rate of return. However, if we bring those spillover tax revenues, then the rate of return will become much higher. Then private investors will be willing to invest in this high-speed rail. Please go to next. Then this is the estimation. Control group in the bottom is no high-speed rail or railways. The red line is a region where high-speed rail was constructed. Then we can compare two regions, the differences in their tax revenues. Then the high-speed rail will bring very high tax revenues shown in the red diagram. Please go to next. Then this is the traditional Uzbekistan's railway case, and I'm sure high-speed rail will have much bigger impact than this original railway. However, Uzbekistan's railway had a positive impact. First one is agricultural sector. The railway could have brought the farmers can sell their products to the large cities much quicker, much fresher. So there was a positive, strong positive impact to agricultural sectors, farmers. Next. Then next one is the industrial sector. New development of industries which can use ordinary railways, and also the connectivity of those railways between cities to the production places, a very significant impact into their manufacturing. And lastly, next page, services sector has been also benefited because new restaurants, new shopping malls along the railways and the stations can be constructed, new businesses can operate it. So in overall, please go to next. In Uzbekistan's case, this railway has increased regional impact of GDP for 2% compared to other regions. That has contributed much higher tax revenues into the Uzbekistan. And 2/3 of those Uzbekistan tax revenue increment can be returned to infrastructure investors. then the rate of return for infrastructure will be much, much higher. That can attract pension funds and insurance. Please go to next. And this is a case of Japan's high-speed rail. Please look at the left-hand side. There are three bar lines. Blue line is construction, before the construction, and yellow part is partial completion, and gray one is after completion of railways. This high-speed rail brought about twice as much tax revenues to the regions. First block is income tax of the person, and second one's corporate tax revenues. The last one on the right-hand side is property tax revenues that had speculations. So even during the construction period, speculators started to purchase those land. So the impact on the land is continuous, but the income tax and corporate tax revenues has significantly increased after the completion of high-speed rail. So I'm sure the similar thing can be seen in Uzbekistan's case. That can bring higher rate of return if these incremental tax revenues can be transferred to infrastructure investors and also operating companies. Please go to next. The similar study can be applied to communication mobile network. Along these high-speed rail, I think internet connections can be also constructed along this high-speed rail that can connect much better, a much bigger broadband network into the region that can create much higher rate of return. This is the case of Indian case, and please go to next. So India's case, the rate of return of this spillover has been returned, then the rate of return would have been increased 14.2%. So high-speed rail, together with the digital network construction by using those railway tracks, that can bring much bigger impact into the economic growth. Thank you very much. Those are my proposals. High-speed rail is very important, but at the same time, regional developments and bringing new businesses into the region. Furthermore, if the digital network or broadband can be parallel used for this high-speed rail network, that can contribute the connections of various businesses much bigger. The impact will be very large. So based on Japanese case and Indian's case, and I think high-speed rail will have big spillover effects, and those incremental tax revenue can finance the lower rate of return to upgrade higher rate of return. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Naoki Oyashina. Excellent presentation. I would like to invite open Q&A now. Please raise your hand, those who want to ask live, or put in Q&A box. Waiting for questions. So while we are waiting, let me ask first. So there is lots of spillover effects. Even there are many effects which not mentioned, right? Because you had very short time. So for example, there is evidence shows that when a city is connected, more girls go to better universities. So there is also spillover effects from education, healthcare. People then healthcare is more accessible, especially so it's important for women. So there are many spillover effects, and they can be measured. And I think it's objective for every government. They want this spillover effect to be maximized. All the benefits, direct benefits, indirect benefits, spillover effects, they want to be maximized, right? So can you give Professor Yoshina advice to government, like how to make sure that they get such high benefits or spillover effects like you showed in Japan?
Yes, I want to give one example in India. I looked at the Indian subway system. When I looked at station, there's no station development. It could have been much more developed in shopping malls, restaurants, could have been increased. However, subway railway network in India is operated by Ministry of Construction, and they're not interested in to increase the spillover effects. But once the return of these spillover effects will be internalized to their businesses, then the railway company would like to expand the region. And the regional development will also increase the spillover effects. bringing businesses into the region, and also education network can be constructed. Many people can move from one place to another much more quickly. Then remote work can be possible, and that can enhance for many ladies and elderly people can contribute into the region. So I think the spillover effect is very important. And one more addition is in Central Asia is now will be facing with aging population. Then pension funds will be needed. And once you start collecting pension funds, where do you invest? Then if they can invest into this infrastructure, which has high rate of return, then the good circulation of domestic money into domestic investment. That can create much further increment of economic development. So it's a win-win situation for the country. Elderly people can receive higher pension benefits, and also economic growth will be achieved. That will further increase the rate of return for pension owners. So elderly people will be happy, and also the users for those high-speed rail will become very productive.
Thank you very much, Professor Yoshino. Yeah, this is very important. Before I joined ADB, I thought infrastructure construction is simply like building road or simply building railways, but actually project include many other features a part of the building road or railway, like even installing solar panels, convenient transit, and so on. So there is another question, a very good question from Kai Shu. Thank you so much for asking. This is an excellent question. How to align the long-term spillover effects with short-term political turnaround? Governors may not be convinced for investment by spillover effect as they focus more on returns that can seen with their political term.
I see. Okay. Spillover effects may become positive in 3 to 4 years, and so on. I think it always happens to any government offices, not only mayors of the city, but each government, they will change once every 3-4 years. Then that any ministry, any project has to be very much short-term oriented. And that also applies to the private business. Some of the top people in the private business, they are only 3 or 4 years term. So they tend to think about only short term rather than looking at in the long term. So my own proposal is their bonus payment should be changed. Currently, their bonus payments are based on their own short-term profits or benefits, even private companies and so on. That's why they are very much myopic. They are only thinking about their own terms. But if the bonus has been postponed, and if the performance of the future is better, then their bonus maybe 1%, 2% will be increased. Those incentive mechanisms together with the long-term thinking will be very important, not only these projects, but also private businesses and other government businesses between the term of the politics and also the project term. So I think I would like to propose even those politicians are very short-term, they have to also think about two long-term perspectives. That is very important.
Thank you very much. And a related question, a bit similar, from Chirag Shinkao. Many countries aim to expand to modernize their railway networks, but face significant limitations in public funding. At the same time, private investors often show limited interest in railway projects due to long payback periods and perceived risk. What strategies or policy measures can governments adopt to make this railway project more attractive for private sector?
I have one paper with Dina, and I was proposing the floating interest rate infrastructure bond, which means for first few years, interest rates are same as government bonds when the spillover effects are very low. But after 4 or 5 years, spillover effects becomes higher, and then the rate of return will become higher than the rate of interest on government bonds. Then after those periods, then additional tax revenue should be added to these government bonds, and the rate of return will become higher. So I think we have to construct a floating interest rate infrastructure bond. During the first 2 periods, interest rate is the same as government bonds. But after these spillover effects be realized, then the rate of return will become higher and higher. And as I said, if the spillover tax revenues were returned to these infrastructure companies, then the rate of return will keep on rising, and that can develop the region, and development of the region can increase the rate of return. So this is a positive plus impact for both investors and for the regions.
So we come here to a next question, which are related to what you just said. I think this participant understood your lecture very well from Naravit Tongnak. So how to avoid corruption if tax revenues are used to subsidize private high-speed railway operator? So I think I agree with him. I think high trust is really needed.
Yeah, I think transparency is very important. So those are government sector and also private sector. If private investors are coming in, then they have to watch all these accounting mechanisms, books, and every day. So that will make the transparency of the project. And furthermore, if the World Bank or ADBI can support 10% or 5% of these projects, then the international organization also come into here. And if the tax return will be implemented, then we have to know how much tax revenue had been collected into the region. So transparency will become much, much higher, and that will reduce the corruption and also the transparency of the projects.
Okay, so there is a hand raised.
Hello. My name is Tuyết. I'm from Vietnam. Because Vietnam is also working on to build the high-speed railway too. So I have 3 questions coming to this section. The number one is that I don't see many models in the country all over the world doing both freight and passenger at the same time. Can you share that? What is the challenge for that if Vietnam want to do the dual purpose? And the second is that because Vietnam geography is very long, along the coastal, how you will see that will impact on the growth of the tier 2 provinces, as well as the remote worker, the chance for the remote worker. You see the reallocation of the the workforce there. The third question will be relating to the pension fund. This is very interesting because the pension fund in Vietnam just launched the kind of the intention to renew that. So I want to learn more which model that I can learn more about how to use the pension fund to fund the high-speed railway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the first one is important. Passengers and also cargos. And in Japan, we are proposing cargos should be used too. Especially passenger time is 6 o'clock in the morning until 11. But from midnight to until 5 o'clock in the morning, those lines are not used at all. And if the flights can be used, I think during the midnight, then these high-speed rail can be shipping those products in the evening. So then that will increase the rate of return much higher. So that is number one. So not only passengers, but also cargo trains are very important. And cargo can run in the evening, at night. So that is our proposal. And probably part of it in Japan, we started that one. Second one is tier 2 cities and so on. In Japan, high-speed rail goes tier 2 cities and very rural area, and also connecting very large cities and so on. But then the benefit of these 2-tier cities, they have their own products, or they have their own people, and they can commute to the large cities very short period of time, and they can have access to work and access to the production. So that is the benefits. And third one is pension funds. Pension funds in many Asian countries, they are invested into Europe, US, and so on, rather than utilizing those money within the country. So if spillover tax revenue can be returned to infrastructure investors, then the rate of return will become much higher. And as the economic growth, like in Vietnam, will become higher, the rate of return will become higher. Then you can circulate your pension funds within the country rather than putting your money into abroad to look for the higher rate of return. I think savings, domestic savings, including pension money, should be circulated within the country, and so that the economic growth can be achieved. Then I think number 3 is highly related to my proposal. The rate of return should have been increased because of the spillover development of the region, and that can create the new instruments for the investment of pension funds in Vietnam. Thank you.
Sorry, Professor Yoshina. Yeah, thank you for answering. The time is up for our session. So let me please wrap up. Thank you so much, Professor Yoshina. He just presented you the model to attract private investments. So if you work especially for government and you're looking for attracting investments in infrastructure, any infrastructure, so you can talk to Professor Yoshina and check his proposal how to attract investments in private in infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yoshino, and thank you, Dr. Dina, for the valuable insights on the challenges faced by financing high-speed rail in Uzbekistan, and also may on these ideas serve as a starting point to solving such challenges in the future. And now we're behind the clock, and our apology that we are going to skip the 5 minutes break, and we will now moving directly on the third session of today's webinar on the institutional arrangements for operation and maintenance of high-speed rail in Uzbekistan. The session will be moderated by Professor Pomfret, our speaker for the session 1. And welcome back, Professor Richard Pomfret. And he will be joined by Professor Dafran Rajiba, Professor and Dean, and Professor Altin Lezov, both professor from Tashkent State Transport University. Their combined expertise in high-speed rail and electric rolling stock in engineering will be bringing the valuable technical and practical insights to the discussions. And Professor Pomfret, you will be moderating this session, so the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nia. Do you want us to do the poll to begin with?
Yes.
Can we post the poll questions? Yes, thank you.
Professor, you can either, yes.
Oh, okay. So 2 questions are, what is the biggest organization and maintenance challenge for railways in your country? And the second question is, who should primarily be responsible for high-speed rail operation and maintenance in your country?
I think we can come back to highlight the result, and maybe during the Q&A session. What do you think, Professor?
Okay, yeah,
Yes,
because we're running a little bit behind. It'd be good to move on.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to welcome the 2 professors from the Tashkent Transport University, Professor Davran and Professor Altin. I think we're all waiting for this session because we have 2 presenters with obviously very good in-country experience, and so I'm sure you want to hear them talking rather than me at this point, so I pass the floor over to Professor, I think it's Professor Davran's going to take the lead, start it off, yes? Anyway, over to you. You need to yeah, good.
Да. Здравствуйте. Да. Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Прежде всего хотел поблагодарить за представленную возможность принять участие в сегодняшнем семинаре. Как было уже сказано ранее, я являюсь профессором Ташкентского государственного транспортного университета. Так как у нас время ограничено, позвольте сразу перейти к лекции. Надеюсь, перевод моей презентации уже начался, поэтому я приступлю к своей презентации. Значит, в своей презентации я рассматриваю институциональную эволюцию железнодорожного сектора Республики Узбекистан и механизмы, обеспечивающие эксплуатацию и техническое обслуживание высокоскоростного железнодорожного сообщения на модернизированной инфраструктуре с широкой колеей. Особое внимание мы уделяем в нашей презентации таким вопросам, как переходу от административных структур советской эпохи к современным моделям управления, сложностям внедрения высокоскоростного сообщения на перешедшим к нам по наследству железнодорожным сетям, а также потребностям в наращивании потенциала, связанным с эксплуатацией современного подвижного состава от зарубежных производителей. Да. Значит, если брать историю развития, уважаемый профессор Ричард уже много осветил в нашей истории развития. Позвольте уделить внимание уже таким более тонким вопросам. Если брать начало истории, как сказал профессор, она начинается в конце 19 года. В Средней Азии были построены первые железнодорожные линии в рамках Транскаспийской железной дороги, которая была частью Российской империи. В советский период железнодорожная сеть на территории современного Узбекистана значительно расширилась и стала неотъемлемой частью единой железнодорожной системы Советского Союза, обеспечивая как грузовые перевозки, так и региональные пассажирские сообщения по всей Центральной Азии. Существенные темпы развития железнодорожной сети начались после Великой Отечественной войны. В 1946 году, после формирования местных органов управления железнодорожной сети, которая получила в дальнейшем название Среднеазиатское управление железными дорогами, руководителем был назначен Азиз Мавлянович Кадыров. Это выдающийся руководитель. Под его руководством железнодорожная сеть начала активные темпы расширения. Были внедрены технологии безопасности железнодорожного движения. Организовано обновление локомотивного парка путем перехода от паровозов к тепловозам. То есть от steam machines до дизель-локомотив. Внедрение двухпутных участков и первая электрификация железных дорог. Он руководил железной дорогой Средней Азии до 1984 года и являлся коренным уроженцем Узбекистана. Он родился в городе Ташкенте, в центре исторического Ташкента, это так называемое место Чорсу. После его ухода уже наблюдался спад развития железной дороги, как и в целом Советского Союза. В этот период в состав Среднеазиатской железной дороги входили железные дороги не только самого Узбекистана, но и Туркменистана, Таджикистана, южных частей Кыргызстана и Казахстана до станции Чингельди, Бейнео, а также с начала 80-х годов железнодорожная станция Харатон на севере Афганистана. Это все было единой среднеазиатской дорогой, которой руководил Азиз Мавлянович. После распада Советского Союза в 1991 году новообразованная независимая Республика Узбекистан унаследовала значительную часть железнодорожной инфраструктуры, которая требовала институциональной реконструкции, реструктуризации и модернизации. В 1994 году указом президента была создана национальная железнодорожная компания, которая называется Узбекистан Тимир Йоллары, в форме единого государственного акционерного общества, являющегося национальным железнодорожным перевозчиком и владельцем инфраструктурной сети. Первоначально компания одновременно выполняла множество функций, включая управление инфраструктурой, железнодорожные перевозки, нормативный надзор, разработку отраслевой политики. Такой институциональный механизм был типичен для постсоветских железнодорожных систем, где оператор железных дорог де-факто выполнял функции и регулятора. Крупная институциональная реформа произошла в 2019 году, когда правительство передало функции формированию политики и регулированию новосозданному Министерству транспорта Республики Узбекистан. В результате было установлено более четкое институциональное разделение. То есть Министерство транспорта стало отвечать за стратегическое планирование, тарифную политику, нормативно-правовую базу, в то время как Национальная железнодорожная компания сосредоточилась преимущество преимущественно на операционной деятельности в управлении инфраструктурой и реализации инвестиционных проектов. В конце 2023 года компания была преобразована в холдинг с разделением на 6 отдельных структур по направлениям. Первое – это инфраструктура. Второе – грузовые перевозки, затем логистика, пассажирские перевозки, управление станциями и другие функции. Результатом реформ стало значительное улучшение финансовых показателей. В 2024 году железнодорожная отрасль Узбекистана впервые вышла на чистую прибыль в размере 46,6 миллиардов сомов. За первые 9 месяцев 2025 года чистая прибыль достигла 857,4 миллиарда сомов. Если это пересчитывать на доллары, это 71,6 миллионов долларов США. Для сравнения, в 2023 году убытки отрасли составляли 2,23 триллиона сомов. При этом объемы транзита пассажирских перевозок, экспорта и инвестиций продолжают демонстрировать устойчивый рост. На период 2026-2030 годов поставлена задача как минимум удвоить объем пассажирских и грузовых перевозок. Для этого планируется внедрение систем управления на основе искусственного интеллекта, что позволит снизить эксплуатационные расходы примерно на 20%. Развитие парка вагонов и локомотивов, а также электропоездов. Внедрение высокоскоростного железнодорожного сообщения на инфраструктуре с широкой колеей имеет свою специфику. В отличие от многих стран, развивавших высокоскоростные магистрали путем строительства совершенно новых коридоров, Узбекистан внедрил высокоскоростное сообщение в основном за счет модернизации существующих железнодорожных линий. Первое высокоскоростное сообщение, как было ранее сказано, открыто в 2011 году и ознаменовано было запуском высокоскоростного поезда Афросиаб, который курсировал между Ташкентом и Самаркандом. Линия была 334 километра и эксплуатационная скорость была 230 километров в час. Модернизация предусматривала увеличение радиусов кривых железнодорожного пути путем перестройки отдельных участков дороги, а также в некоторых случаях были построены новые участки, такие как Янгер-Джизак. Также модернизации подверглись и системы электроснабжения контактной сети, чтобы они отвечали новым скоростным требованиям. Последующая модернизация инфраструктуры позволила продлить высокоскоростное сообщение до Бухары, в результате чего общая протяженность модернизированной железнодорожной инфраструктуры, способной обслуживать высокоскоростные пассажирские перевозки, достигла около 600 километров. Составы Афросиаб были поставлены испанским производителем Talgo. Они созданы на базе платформы Talgo T250 и оснащены технологией пассивного наклона кузова, которая позволяет сохранять более высокую скорость при прохождении кривых на обычных железнодорожных путях. Это технологическое решение позволило Узбекистану организовать высокоскоростное движение на существующей сети широкой колеи, что значительно сократило в целом время в пути и позволило избежать высоких капитальных затрат, связанных со строительством новых высокоскоростных коридоров. На начало 2025 года общая протяженность железнодорожной сети Узбекистана составила 4838,9 километра, из которых электрифицировано на сегодняшний день 2404 километра, что составляет практически 50% от всей сети. За последний год протяженность электрифицированных путей увеличилась на 462,6 километра, то есть на 23,8%. Если говорить о эксплуатационных сложностях на модернизированной инфраструктуре, то эксплуатация высокоскоростных поездов на обычных линиях сопряжена с рядом сложностей. Одной из ключевых проблем является смешанное движение. Высокоскоростные поезда используют ту же инфраструктуру, что и обычные пассажирские, а также грузовые поезда, что требует тщательного планирования расписания. и управления движением для обеспечения надежности и безопасности перевозок. Помимо сложностей с организацией движения, железнодорожная инфраструктура Узбекистана должна функционировать в суровых и климатических условиях, типичных для Центральной Азии. Летом температура воздуха может превышать 40 градусов по Цельсию, а железнодорожная инфраструктура регулярно подвергается воздействию пыли и песка. Во время периодов аномальной жары могут вводиться временные ограничения по скорости для защиты путевой инфраструктуры от термических воздействий. Для повышения пропускной способности и надежности сети ведется плановая модернизация ключевых участков. В период до 2030 года запланировано строительство еще 151 километра новых железнодорожных линий. Электрификация 182 километров существующих путей, модернизация 27 станций и реконструкция 1000 километров железнодорожного полотна. Также предусмотрено увеличение пропускной способности на направлениях Ташкент-Самарканд, Тулкимачи-Ангрен и Ангрен-Папт. Это в сторону Ферганской долины. Планируется открытие 15 пригородных маршрутов в дополнение к существующим 40, что позволит улучшить транспортную доступность для населения среди новых маршрутов Ташкент-Нуравшан, Ахангаран, Наваи-Заравшан-Учкудук, Карши, Шахрисабз и другие. Модернизация подвижного состава собой также имеет важную роль. Внедрение высокоскоростного железнодорожного сообщения потребовало формирования новых технических компетенций и создания мощностей для технического обслуживания. Изначально в Узбекистане высокоскоростное движение было организовано на поездах производства Тальго. Для этих составов в Ташкенте был создан специальный центр технического обслуживания, оснащенный специализированным оборудованием, включая колесо-токарные станки, то есть станки для обточки колес, подъемные системы и системы для мониторинга состояния поезда. В настоящее время Узбекистан обновляет парк подвижного состава за счет сотрудничества с южнокорейским производителем Hyundai Rotem. Для полностью электрифицированной линии Бухара-Ургенч-Хива протяженностью 465 километров будет поставлено 6 высокоскоростных электропоездов Hyundai Rotem. Первый состав уже прибыл в Республику Узбекистан и сейчас проходит динамические испытания. Вот. Хотел отметить также, что новый участок Бухара-Ургенч-Хива уже построен по требованиям, предъявляем к высокоскоростному движению. Первый состав под названием, который у нас называется Джалалдан-Мангуберды, начнет курсировать по маршруту Ташкент-Хива. Хива – это один из исторических городов, который находится на другом конце нашей страны. Как только пройдут все стандартные процедуры динамических испытаний и ввода эксплуатации, уже будет полная его эксплуатация для этого участка. Внедрение этого поезда позволит обслуживать по предварительным расчетам более 3 миллионов пассажиров в год на данном направлении, сократить время в пути с текущих 14 часов до 7 часов 40 минут, увеличит пропускную способность линии именно в грузоперевозках с 1 миллиона до 6 миллионов тонн в год.
Can you wrap up your presentation?
Окей. Да, я понял. Да, я вас понял. Спасибо. Значит, хотелось бы сказать в конце то, что перспективные планы нашей страны, они являются очень амбициозными. Мы продолжаем расширять наши высокоскоростные сети, а также в ближайшее время планируется постройка и на очень актуальном направлении от Ташкента до Самарканда планируется разработка, рассмотрение новых путей. Спасибо за внимание. Если есть вопросы, я готов ответить.
You're muted, Professor Bambang. You're not unmute yet. Can you unmute? Yes, no. Can you?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for that presentation. It's very good to get the detail from within country. Let me move straight to any questions. Do we have questions from the audience? So we have some questions from Venkatasham Kartik. Are these targeted at the current presentation? Venkatasham there is asking about the financial aspect. Do we have that question? No?
You can take this second question from him and also another question from Pratyush. You may look at those two questions. They look relevant to this session.
Okay, so this is the question about the financial internal rate of return.
The next one, the one below that, how do policymakers
avoid getting locked into a good enough equilibrium?
Yeah.
Yeah, where incremental upgrades meet current demand but delay the transition to a network. And there's a related question from Pratyush, who says, placing emphasis on the life cycle costing, how has Uzbekistan ensured adequate funding and discipline for long-term maintenance, particularly once the construction momentum subsides? Sifa, do you want to address that question live first?
No, we can request the professors to address. They can address.
Okay. So can you address this question about maintaining a balance between the initial funding and adequate funding during the project? How has that been achieved in Uzbekistan? Professor Abidxadjayev?
If they wish, they can speak in Russian. We have translation.
There is translation.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Да.
The professors can respond in Russian.
Если позволите, да, если позволите, после меня тоже есть докладчик, это профессор Бахром. Он будет именно экономически скрывать этот вопрос. Я бы не хотел забирать у него возможность тоже высказаться по этому поводу.
Very good.
В свое время, в свою очередь, я лишь хотел сказать,
Richard,
что...
if that is a good idea, we can hand the questions to him and request him to move on to his presentation, and then maybe he can address them in the presentation.
You want Bachram to talk now?
Yeah, that's what he's suggesting, because I believe his presentation covers these questions.
Bachram, are you there? Are you available to sort of give this isn't on the program, no?
No, he's seated next to him, I think.
Maybe you mean Professor Rajiba? You mean Professor Bachram?
Oh, Professor
Yeah.
Then Professor Bachram will not present, but Professor Bachram, you can also help to answer the question as well, if possible.
Okay. So, I mean, would Professor Lisov like to add something?
Я могу частично ответить на этот вопрос, если мне позволят. Я хотел бы осветить этот вопрос с точки зрения организации именно эксплуатации, то есть maintenance. После ввода в эксплуатацию наших высокоскоростных поездов Авросъеб со стороны испанских коллег была оказана помощь и был произведен определенный трансфер технологий, то есть технологий, которые возможно было передать, и они не защищены какими-то ограничениями. И на данный момент обслуживание поездов в определенной части уже передано нашей местной компании, точнее, это акционерное общество, которое является структурным подразделением национальной железнодорожной компании. оно осуществляет обслуживание вместе с коллегами из Испании, из компании Talgo, вот, на основе договора, вот, и разделены уже определенные обязанности. Если говорить об обслуживании, то обслуживание вагонов, если вы посмотрите на сам поезд, то он состоит из локомотивных частей, то есть те, которые стоят на концах поезда, и вагонов, в которых, естественно, переводят пассажиров. Вот. В локомотивах находится все важное оборудование, связанное с тягой, обеспечением безопасности и важной электроникой. И вот первостепенные системы обслуживают наши партнеры из Испании. Однако оборудование касающееся вагонов уже обслуживается нами. У нас произведена даже определенная локализация некоторых запчастей. Есть такое понятие, как быстро изнашиваемые запчасти, которые необходимы для обслуживания, такие как стекла, резиновые изделия, либо элементы обслуживания для комфорта пассажиров. Так вот эти вещи мы уже локализовали, вследствие чего мы сократили стоимость на обслуживание этого поезда. Вот. Если брать официальные источники, если я не ошибаюсь, то мы продлили контракт с Talgo на таких же условиях еще на 10 лет. Вот, и около 70 миллионов, по-моему. Да, ближе к 80 миллионов долларов евро. Это проект на 10 лет, то есть это стоимость обслуживания за 10 лет поездов, именно произведенных компанией Talgo. Я надеюсь, я ответил на вопрос.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Professor. I think we're starting to run out of time. We want to move on to the next session at 5:40. So maybe can I pass the microphone to Professor Sivaram to take over at this point?
Thank you very much. With the permission of, thank you very much, Professor Richard Pomfret, and I will request Nia to clarify, and also we will move on to the closing session and concluding session in a moment. Nia, over to you.
Yes, thank you for Dr. Sisaram. Professor Rachibas, Professor Athling is with you now. He's going to answer you want him to answer the question earlier? Margaret, can you help to translate? If it's okay, then we can move on to the next session. Earlier, you mentioned Professor Athling will support your presentation and answer the questions. So you want him to answer the question earlier? If it's okay, then it's fine. I think you also partly answer the question. So we now officially end the session 3 and 2. Thank you, Professor Rachiba, Professor Athling, for joining, and also thank you, Professor Bamfret, for enlightening us on the institutional arrangement for operation and maintenance of high-speed rail. And now, to close the presentation part of our webinar, we are honored to hear the concluding reflections of the distinguished speaker. Please join me to welcome Professor Hironori Kato from the University of Tokyo. Professor Kato is a professor at the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Tokyo, who specializes in transportation planning and policy. With over 25 years of experience in transport economics and travel behavior research, he will deliver the concluding speech for this webinar. Professor Kato, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nia. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then let me start my talk for concluding 3 sessions earlier. I will share my screen. I hope you can see my slides. Okay, so, good. So this is my great honors to make a brief presentations regarding the lessons for developing Asia based on wonderful presentations, very informative talks amongst the participants regarding Uzbekistan's high-speed rails. But before going to the reviews of these presentations achievements, I'd like to highlight the complicated border or geographies in Central Asia. Personally, I have visited several times Central Asia, including the Kazakhstan or the Kyrgyzstan or the Tajikistan, basically in projects of Asian Development Bank. And I always quite confused to see the maps where the very complicated border in these areas, and that's caused various troubles and also challenges amongst the various countries in those areas. Okay, but based on this kind of understanding of complications, we should understand quite a big these landlocked areas across from China to Caspian Seas. Railway should be considered as a very important infrastructures in these regions, including high-speed rail. Okay, then let me start with summarizing the kind of findings from each sessions. From the first sessions, Professor Richard, he talked about the historical backgrounds of Uzbekistan or the neighboring countries' railway systems. And as he highlighted, Russia, the Soviet Union constructed a long-distance railway in Central Asia. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, many countries nationalized railway and road systems. And that is also the case in Uzbekistan. And particularly Uzbekistan, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, they made a lot of effort to make connections to from the Tashkent to the Fergana valleys. Fergana Valley is not so familiar for other countries' people, but that is one of the most important areas for Uzbekistan, and how the railway can be connected to this area is really one of the important policy agenda. And afterwards, from 2011, as reported, Uzbekistan started to introduce high-speed rails, from the connection with between the Tashkent and Samarkand, and further extend to Bukhara, and further recently Kivas. And it's quite a long distance high-speed rail network has been already developed. It's quite surprising for me. And according to his presentation, current challenges for Uzbekistan is how can middle corridors, particularly from China to Caspian ports, can be more attractive ones. I think that is a quite interesting observations, particularly from the very wide scope point of views. In the second sessions, Professor Yoshino made quite interesting presentation based on economic theories. Particularly, he highlighted the spillover effect based on Henry George theorem, and he speaks about the importance of utilizing the tax revenue from the high-speed rails for the investments of high-speed rails. First, he shows the several theories and also the examples. High-speed rail has a spillover effects in addition to direct effects like time-saving effects. But on the other hand, in many countries, particularly in Asian countries, conflict of interest amongst various stakeholders led to the quite many failures in PPP projects. Although the private participation has been very highlighted in high-speed rail developments. And therefore, he proposed spillover tax revenue should be used for the PPP projects in high-speed rail, particular operations. He also shows some empirical evidence with Uzbekistan's case studies. Quite large spillover effects are expected, particularly in industrial sector. That would be very interesting results. And although he skipped the final conclusion parts regarding the land trust issues, but such a land trust scheme based on the spillover effects from the high-speed rail could be effectively introduced for high-speed rail investments. But that is our findings from his presentation. Finally, in session 3, Professor Davram, he talked about institutional system high-speed rail in Uzbekistan. And he first introduced quite amazing railway sector reform in 2019. And in this reform, the government is concentrating on the planning and tariff regulation, while the rail company is in charge of operation, infrastructure management, investment. This kind of unbundlings of functions in the railway sector has been made through this reform. And this led to the significant improvement in finance conditions of the railway sector. That is quite surprising for me. And Uzbekistan's high-speed model, he characterized the modernizing existing lines. That is also quite interesting. As for the high-speed rail technologies, Spanish Talgo train has been introduced. It has the advantage in passive tilting train system. And the existing railways in Uzbekistan is a broad gauge. That is quite a good advantage, probably thanks to Soviet Union, probably. And by using such a broad gauge, the successfully avoids the new capital investment. And plus, but they have some operational challenges like mixed traffic or extreme weathers or infrastructure modernizations. And recently, rolling stock modernizations and fleet diversification is made by inviting Koreans, for example, Hyundai systems. Anyways, they smartly utilize international financings, including China, ADB, AIIB, and also Korean fundings. These are the presentations. Then, how can we learn for developing Asia's? One of the interesting observations from the presentations, it's upgrading existing railway. It's one of the cheapest options. But that is simply thanks to the Soviet era's long-distance railway network availabilities in these regions. And in that sense, they are lucky. However, their systems, high-speed rail systems, covers both high-speed rails and the freight or the conventional trains. Such a mixed traffic may cause probably some troubles. And somebody from probably in Vietnam, participants asked a question about freight issues. Yes, one of the challenges using this kind of mixed traffic is how can we manage the different types of train operations on the same track. Yes, I think that is a quite interesting lesson for us. Second one is the institutional reform in railway sectors. Yes, participation of private companies to high-speed rail investment and operation, it's really important. That is also highlighted by Professor Yoshino's under the scheme of PPP. And the commercial-based system led to improvement of operational efficiencies. So I think this type of reform in institutional system in railway sector is another important lessons. And also additionally, in Uzbekistan's case, high-speed rail developments is led by quite a smart international partnership. And as for the technical issues, they are supported by developed countries like Spain and Korea. Meanwhile, financially, they also got multiple organization support, including ADB, AIIB, China, Korea. So in that sense, yes, they utilize quite a good international community support under the international partnership. I think these are the quite, yes, straightforward but important lessons from their presentations in regarding Uzbekistan's for developing Asia. Finally, I may have raised some questions to presenters. For example, as for the first presentation made by Professor Richard, he concluded the importance of middle corridors. Yes, I agree to your points, particularly the connection between Europe and China. But it requires cross-border railway systems. Of course, maybe thanks to the complexities of cross-border transport, maybe currently Kazakhstan's lines would be preferred. However, if you would like to attract the middle corridors passing through Tashkent, what are the challenges? Do you think whether it's feasible to develop such a cross-border, for example, high-speed rail line? I think that would be also the interesting concern for other Asian countries. Second questions. To the Professor Yoshino's presentations, I wonder what are the major challenges in the land trust approach, particularly in the context of high-speed rail? Because such tax revenue-based or the land value capture like programs are quite popular in the context of urban railway. However, it is rarely found in the intercity railway system. And one of the points is maybe spillover would be a bit local. Meanwhile, high-speed rail should be quite a national-based strategic infrastructure. So this kind of a difference in the geographical coverage would cause some challenges in this type of approach. If you have some ideas to answer this question, please let me know. Oh, sorry, time is coming. Final question is, yes, to the final third presentations. Yeah, I'm really surprised to know the very significant improvement of financial performance of railway sector through the 2019 reform. What are the tricks? So if you have some good ideas about some explanations of very significant improvements of financial performance in Uzbekistan railway sectors, I'd like to know that tricks. Yes, these are my questions and also the summary of findings from 3 presentations. All of them are very wonderful and also interesting to many participants, including me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kato. And now we are going to move to the Professor Kikuchi. Professor Kikuchi will provide the comments and Professor, let me briefly introduce Professor Kikuchi. Professor is professor at the Waseda University, and Professor will draw on his extensive expertise in Asian economic policy and international institutional frameworks to provide the insightful perspective on the high-speed rail case in Uzbekistan. Professor Kikuchi, the floor is yours now.
Okay, thank you, Nia. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. And also, thank you, Professor Kato, for your excellent summary. It's fascinating to learn about the case of Uzbekistan. I traveled through Uzbekistan before, following the Silk Road on the occasion of attending the wedding of my former student. However, I didn't know much about HSR in Uzbekistan. I'm a macroeconomist, but have done projects in the past on Singapore, Kuala Lumpur HSR project, as well as Vietnamese HSR project. So I think my task today is to share what I've learned from those projects and possible implications for other HSR projects in Asia. So first of all, I would like to mention that HSR project has a classical problem. It is a big infrastructure project, usually financed by debt, and but it stimulates GDP immediately due to the high construction volume. So it appeals to politicians, but eventually it must make operational profit to be sustainable. So as it was mentioned by previous speakers, the entire life cycle from financing and building and operating is important to assess the feasibility of HSR. Equally important is to recognize that HSR is a public good. So PPP, private-public partnership, is necessary, and how to measure externalities or spillover effect, as it was mentioned by Professor Yoshino, is crucial for potential profitability. And the stakeholders here must be the local population. For cross-border HSR, it is about identifying the benefits and costs of regional integration and market integration. unless there is a strong drive for regional integration, the benefits will be limited. And here, the population dynamics and urbanization are at the core of regional development. Although HSR connections are not just about profitability, and they are highly symbolic, providing mobility to people within a geographical sphere, so it is about national or regional inclusivity, but still HSR must be operationally profitable to be sustainable. So let me share with you some of the stylized facts and observations from existing HSR connections in the world. By definition, high-speed railway, it is considered a high-speed railway if it travels higher than 250 kilometers per hour. Optimal length of HSR connection seems to be 350 kilometers, and Tashkent Samarkand being 344 kilometers seems to hit the optimal length. Competing, and why is this optimal? Because it's high-speed railway typically competes with other modes of transportation such as flights. Okay, so we have done some studies analyzing the HSR connections in the world. For 90-minute traveling time, the railway share, high-speed railway share, is above 90%. So it cannot be too short, it cannot be too long. HSR connection and agglomeration effect. Usually in regional economics, if you connect point A and B, and let's say city A and B, the bigger one gets bigger, and that's the agglomeration effect, right? So the population distribution across cities in an integrated market follows the so-called rank size rule, showing a strong relationship between population size of cities and their ranking by size. It is simply the fact that HSR connections alone do not make them profitable. Smooth connection to urban public transportation systems are crucial. And there is a very strong correlation between population density and HSR profitability. For cities in Southeast Asia, domestic urban agglomeration, according to our estimate, is not sufficient to make HSR profitable. And that means there is a need for regional economic integration. However, cross-border infrastructure brings itself new challenges. Benefits of HSR connection will not be evenly distributed across cities, and every country wants its own city to be a hub. Part of the solution could be not just passenger transport, but freight, as also was mentioned by previous speakers, especially when connecting urban and rural areas where agriculture or manufacturing are located. Finally, you may be interested to know that among the 6 railway companies in Japan, JR Central is the only company that derives its core profit from HSR alone, which operates a golden rule connecting the 2 largest urban agglomerations in the world, Tokyo and Osaka. And that obviously poses a challenge for HSR connecting any of the cities that have lower population density. Japanese railway companies derive their business, diversify, therefore, their business to real estates, hotels, and shopping malls, and so on. And this was also highlighted by Professor Yoshino. I know I'm over time, so let me end by asking 2 questions. One, since the HSR in Uzbekistan seems to be part of the China-Europe connection, what are the risks that Uzbekistan becomes just a pass-by country and there is no benefit spillover to Uzbekistan? Second, if that is true, how can we tap into benefits that accrue to other countries that utilize a HSR connection going through Uzbekistan? Thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thank you, Professor Kikuchi, and thank you, Professor Kato. We are running behind time, so I'm going to rush to the final panel discussion, which I have been asked to chair. Thank you, Nia and Joshua, for putting it together. I think Professor Kato and Professor Kikuchi has made my job very easy. I'm going to request Nia to share the last slide that Professor Kato put, asking 3 questions. We can use that for the panel discussion. Basically, we all know that high-speed rail is an important transition for the economic trajectory of the country, but it's not without challenges. So let me ask in this order. We have distinguished participants who have joined. So first we'll invite Professor Ahmad Farhan, from Vice Chancellor of the University of Putra, Malaysia, followed by Professor Yu Chow, who is also Professor and Dean of the National Yang Min Chao Tung University in Taipei, China. So after that, I'm going to request each of the speakers and the presenters to respond to any one of these questions and relate to the discussions today. So over to you, Professor Farhan first.
Thank you. Hi, greetings from Malaysia. I've been following the discussion intensely and interesting, different perspective. I was in the Commission for Public Transport in Malaysia, where we were looking into the first Malaysian HSR project. And Professor Tomo told us that he was involved, and I think the points that he brought is very critical. I also did not hear much about discussion of demand and supply. I presume they are well utilized. But I think to answer the question of feasibility, those were the concerns that we had. One, whether HSR for Malaysia, for example, whether it is sufficient in terms of patronage or passenger to recover. And we were told, Osaka and Tokyo is the only one profitable or using that as the main revenue stream. So I had my doubts then. I did not support actually the project because I felt we do not have enough length, kilometer from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore. That was the proposal. And I don't think we have enough demand. And indeed, competition is also very strong from the existing modes. And I think, of course, the Malaysian project with the Singapore collaboration was trying the PPP model. And I guess the government has seen that it is not able to move about. A bit on the cross-border, I think we are also looking into the ASEAN cross-border model, right, throughout the whole spine. I think it's something that we have talked about for many years, but it is still not up and running. I think there are some issues, technical issues, gauge are different. But I guess the win-win situation is also very difficult to achieve. And when we look into even Malaysia and Singapore, which are sort of very close in terms of culture and also perhaps governance in some way, we were not able to also get the clinch on the HSR. So I guess from Malaysian perspective, we are also learning a lot from Whoosh in Indonesia. And I think that should also be something that especially the ASEAN region should learn from. Maybe a short one first from me, Sita, as a reflection in terms of risk. But I am interested in the tax thing, which I wanted to ask, but maybe later in our discussion.
Yeah, we will discuss. Thank you.
Relief, the land tax, that's interesting.
Thank you. So, Professor Chow, over to you, because you have gone through the hurdles and you have rich experience in your country. So maybe you can share the experience of Taipei, China, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sitaran.
You're
I'm
muted.
very happy
We can't
and
hear you.
honored to join. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
No, we are not able to hear your audio.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I would like to focus on the cross-border issues. I believe that high-speed rail definitely is a good approach, a solution to increase the connectivity and the competitiveness of the cross-border transportations. But as everyone mentioned that for the different countries might face different gauge of track, and they might need some gauge changing interface. The second is that they might face the different chain technology. So the integration between them would be a very key issue need to overcome. The second is if there is a cross-border means there's not transportation is not alone for the solutions. They still need to have a constant our mitigation check. So the constant the digitize all the constant service to make it efficiency is another very important issues. So any delays at the borders, they will offset all the transportation efficiency. So there's the first I would like to add about the cross-border issues. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we are now doing good on time. So I'm going to, Nia, can you please show the slide again with Professor Kato's 3 questions? Then I'll request in the order Professor Richard first, and then followed by Professor Yoshino, then other speakers who are available, Professor Rajayev, to comment on, respond to any of the 3 questions, and maybe we can continue another round of discussions. I think Professor Fadan also was interested about the tax. So Professor Richard first.
Okay, thank you, Sita. Yeah, first of all, we look at, somebody raised the question of can freight and passenger traffic go on the same track? I think it is a problem. It needs coordination, but it's definitely not insuperable. I mean, Professor Yoshino said that there's a difference between peak demand, between when passenger trains go and when freight trains go. Digitalization is obviously a key to this. It's going to help management. You know, you can do this very well. Secondly, we've had some mention of the change of gauge issue. I don't think the change of gauge is a major issue for Uzbekistan. All 5 neighboring countries use the same gauge. They use the broad gauge that came from the Russian Empire. When you change gauge between, say, China and Central Asia, it's very efficient now on freight trains. You know, 40 minutes or so. You know, you're just to shift the containers across. So I don't think that is a major issue. Can HSR contribute to upgrading the middle corridor? Yeah, definitely, because the middle corridor is all about being faster than sea transport. Is there a danger of being just a crossover country? I think not really. I mean, Uzbekistan is already using these upgraded rail connectivity to export things like fertilizers to Europe and to export to China. The fees that's received from transit countries are not negligible. You know, the last numbers I have for Kazakhstan, which are from about 5 years ago, before Ukraine, before COVID, they were earning about $4 or $5 billion a year in transit fees. That's a major service export. Yeah. So it's good to be a crossover country, but you can also tap into it to use the same lines to export your own goods and to import goods. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Yoshino, maybe you can talk about the other question.
Thank you very much. I think urban railways, they rely on land value capture because land property tax is local tax and urban transport is operated by local government. That's why they are internally bringing tax to the railways. However, income tax, corporate tax, and property and the sales taxes in the US are not local tax. That's why Henry George only concentrated on land value capture, which is a property tax. However, I'm proposing not only land value capture, property tax, but also income tax, corporate tax, and sales tax revenues. These are mainly national tax revenues. So that is very suitable for high-speed rail. So I think we should focus on entire tax revenues rather than focusing on property tax revenue, where it is mainly collected by local government. Thank you.
Thank you. There are some questions. I think third question, maybe Professor Rajayev, maybe you might want to answer. You can respond in Russian also, if you would like to.
May I have one revision because I showed in this slide 1991 reform, but that should be the 2019 reform.
Yeah, 2019 reform. Thank you, Professor Kato.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
I wrongly wrote that.
Over to you, Professor Rajayev.
Да, thank you. Спасибо. Да, я понял вопрос. Значит, прежде всего нужно было отметить то, что произошла ключевая трансформация, то есть было разделение основных деятельностей на ключевые сферы, как я сказал в своей презентации. То есть когда инфраструктурные подразделения были отделены в единую компанию, которая так у нас и называется, компания, занимающаяся инфраструктурой, компании. Затем общие стратегические решения уже были частично переложены на Министерство транспорта, которое тоже начало функционировать. Также вы помните, что в 2020 году у нас случился ковид, вот, и свои факторы, несмотря на воздействие всей этой ситуации, правильное разделение, а также сокращение вследствие трансформации было оптимизированы многие структурные подразделения. Если смотреть на саму компанию, которая называлась Uzbekistan Timur Yolları, в ней было действительно очень много таких элементов, которые необходимо было оптимизировать. И вот эта оптимизация привела к тому, что там, где в областях, связанных с грузоперевозками, с обеспечением оптимальных перевозок именно как грузов, так и пассажиров без задержек у нас, это все было рассмотрено. Очень большая комплексная работа была проведена. Естественно, я хотел бы еще добавить, если брать сегодняшнее в дальнейшее развитие, которое я не успел договорить в своем докладе, то что если говорить о высокоскоростных дорогах, то мы взаимодействие не только сейчас с испанскими коллегами при закупке высокоскоростных поездов, не только с южнокорейскими коллегами, но также рассматривается закупка и у китайских коллег, то есть китайские высокоскоростные поезда, потому что Китай тоже имеет очень большой опыт в этом плане. И если говорить не только о составах, а в общем к подходу к обслуживанию, уделению внимания безопасности, ведь чем выше скорости, как вы сказали до этого наши коллеги, тем выше требования к безопасности. Вот. И перенимая этот опыт, развивая систему, мы стремимся так можно сказать, догнать мировые стандарты, предъявляемые к высокоскоростному движению.
Thank you very much. Before I request other two colleagues who have joined us, I'm going to share a feedback. Professor Kikuchi nicely pointed to the importance of doing non-rail activities. In Japan, we call it transit-oriented development or station area development. Recently, we completed an edited volume at ADB Institute, which looked at the experience of urban rail, not specific to high-speed rail, because this applies to all rail stations. At the end of the day, the revenues from rail is not sufficient to cover all the operating expense and, more importantly, recover the capital expense in a short period of time. So politically, it's very difficult, and also socially, it may not be very acceptable. The experience from Japan is very compelling and persuasive to concomitantly do master planning where you can systematically recoup, as Professor Yoshino mentioned, the impact of the rail by designing urban development plans to develop the benefits and also recover the revenues from those into the rail companies. There's a book that Nia has kindly shared. Now, let me welcome colleagues Daniel and Sayaka Sugiyama. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you very much, Citra. This is Daniel. So Well, no more questions from my side. Just to thank you all the presenters for all your talks. It has been quite interesting. Well, I'm actually originally from Spain, so that's one of the things that I found more interesting. And also, this is very anecdotal, but if I'm correct, one of the initial engineers establishing the Soviet railways was a Spanish engineer who was kicked out from Spain, actually. So it's an interesting connection. I think the goals is different, but that's one of the connections I believe there is between Spanish and Uzbekistan railways. I think it was interesting from the historical point of view.
You're right. He did mention that, and we rushed him in the slide. He showed that how the Spanish technology was first brought in, and then later they also adopted other technologies.
It's much older. It's
much older, before that, even before that, you're saying.
Even Agustín de Betancourt, he established the civil engineering school in Spain, and he also, I think, it was one of the first established in Russia.
Excellent.
He was kicked out during the French Revolution.
So. Okay. Very nice history.
His name was too French for being in Spain.
Okay.
Thank
you very much.
All history.
Thank you very much. Okay, and now for the last word, last comment, Sayaka, over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Sorry, I was really surprised. So my question would be, so my background is actually like frontline operation of irrigation engineers, but kind of related to my background, but like when it comes to like cross-border transportation system, I think the integration of frontline management across different countries, having different cultures, are really like important challenge. So how they manage all these things is really important when it comes to like following the timeline and creating the full system across the border. So how did they like accomplish this huge goal? So that's the my interest. Thank you.
Yeah, this may be something from our Uzbek colleagues. Would you want to, because I think your example or experience is something fascinating, which is a landlocked country, and you have to look at various cross-border situations. Do you have some sharing about how, when you were operating the systems, what are the challenges you faced, what lessons you can share for other countries? Over to you. Professor Abidxadjayev?
Спасибо за возможность ответить на этот вопрос. Если говорить о трансграничных перевозках, как говорили профессора, Узбекистан исторически является центром перекрестком всех коридоров. Если вы знаете, это перекресток Великого Шелкового пути. Вот. И поэтому на сегодняшний день очень актуально остается вопрос транзита грузов. И действительно большой транзит грузов идет, однако сегодняшний наш семинар посвящен именно высокоскоростному движению. И сейчас ведется, по моей информации, диалог с коллегами из Казахстана для увеличения туристического потенциала. Это международные движения между историческим городом Туркестан и Самарканд. Именно будет оно связано тоже высокоскоростным движением. Вот. И это будет первый шаг к такому вот именно уже международному сотрудничеству. В дальнейшем уже Узбекистан имеет ряд проектов, над которыми мы работаем. Но первым шагом будет именно вот этот проект.
Thank you. We've kind of come to the end of our discussion time. Just me also share that the context of this webinar is to learn from the experience of many countries. Professor Kato and we are also preparing an international study group where we are looking at experience of the countries, especially the first line of HSR is actually more difficult. So to get it started is more difficult, and then even more difficult is to continue it into a network. So all these challenges remain, but these are important steps countries will need to take to to really climb from the ladder of the middle income to the upper income. HSR is not a fancy project. Yes, if you don't get it well, it can make losses, but if you get it right, it can take you to the next level of economic trajectory. So countries need to cooperate, landlocked countries need to share resources. There are a lot of technical challenges, but it can be done. So the can be done is our kind of research, but we are asking questions, political, economic, financial, and other challenges to overcome, because these are long-term projects. So we really thank all of you for participating. More importantly, I want to thank Nia and Joshua, who actually put this together for today's session, and we have an excellent participation. Let me hand it back to Nia and Joshua, and thank you all. Nia, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Saram, for guiding the panel discussion, open discussion. And now we have, before we conclude today's webinar, we have a few announcements. So to help us improve our future events, we kindly ask that you take 2 minutes to complete a feedback survey. Please take a moment to complete it before you leave. And of course, you can also access the survey using the link in the chat. And in the meantime, we would like to announce that we also post this webinar on our social media account and ADBI website. You can find the recording and presenter slide on the event website. And on behalf of ADBI, we extend our sincere gratitude to all the speakers and participants for making today's discussion to rich and engaging. We also would like to thank you, our ADBI team that Dr. Amori mentioned earlier, especially our intern Joshua. Actually, he also had done a lot of work. We hope this insight shared in today's webinar will spark further dialogue and encourage actions toward advancing high-speed rail networks in Asia and beyond. And let this be the beginning of a continued collaboration and knowledge exchange across our shared communities. And thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at the Futures event. And we wish you a wonderful day. And goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, all the speakers. Thank you, Kato Sensei.
Thank you,
Kikuchi Sensei. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And now we end the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, Nia. Thank you, Joshua.
Okay. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.